Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check him out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Welcome back to Twisted Tales, folks. So, ladies and gents, my next tale I have for you, it's gonna be bad, I'm not gonna lie. There's abuse, it's like spousal abuse, child abuse. There's a little bit of stuff with dogs. Yeah, so that's not overly something to jump right into. But there's trigger warnings on this, so this whole thing's gonna be a trigger warning. Let's just leave it at that. So this one's for my buddy Mike, and I totally forgot about this case, because it was a big thing back home. I remember I was in grade 5, maybe, and this was about 93, 94, and there was a movie that came out. It was called Life with Billy, and it involves a woman named Jane Hurshman Corkham. She was born January 25th, 1949. Now, her notoriety stems from being known as the woman who killed her abusive husband, Lamont William Stafford, or Billy for short. And this was back in 1982. Now, Jane was born in Brooklyn, Queens County, Nova Scotia. It's a small little suburban community. Population of 849 as of 2 years ago. So 2021. Now, a little thing here is I totally forgot about this story, like I said, and it was a movie when I was a kid. I remember teachers talking about it when I was in grade 5 in elementary or whatever. So I'm thinking that would have been 93, I believe. And I probably would have been around 8 or 9 years old. The movie came out, and it was called Life with Billy. Now, I remember people talking about how messed up this was, but I didn't think about it all that much. Now, it wasn't until, my buddy Mike mentioned it. So, I started to look it up. Honestly, holy fuck. This one's a doozy, boys and girls. So, I'm just gonna toss up, some episode details here, like the abuse towards children, and, it's just one just to fucking dive right into. So, Nova Scotia, and that's where to begin, I guess. So, I guess we'll start at the beginning. So, Nova Scotia, Canada, my home and native land, located on the eastern seaboard of North America. Now, one of the 4 original provinces, along with New Brunswick, Ontario, and Quebec, this constituted the Dominion of Canada. So, enough about geography, and let's fire this off. So, tale goes, a Cape Breton woman thought she met this whole, knight in shining armor, but she already came from an abusive relationship prior to this one, and now she got to live it all over again. Now, the man was Billy Stafford, just a big motherfucker of a man. And he had the charm about him, too. And that's what attracted her to him. Because he had, a strong, tough guy persona. And one hell of a temper. But she didn't find this out until, a little bit into the relationship. Now, Stafford was a man known quite well around the town of Bangs Falls, Nova Scotia. But as a boy, he was just trying to live his life with an abusive household. So I'm assuming, the beatings from his father had stemmed over and, shit runs downhill, right? Now, William Billy Lamont Stafford was born 1941. He had a shitty childhood, like I said, as his father constantly abused him. And this definitely shaped him up to be, like, the piece of shit person that I'm going to talk about on this one. Now, abuse was a normal thing in the household, and it does go on everywhere, unfortunately. Most people do notice, but some turn a blind eye, and things just end up getting worse. So there's always ways out, folks, just know that. So by the time that Billy met Jane, both of them had failed marriages. And Jane really fell for this guy at first, but Stafford's unpredictable temper, abuse, full-on brutality to be honest, and weird sexual perversions would soon run rampant. And his angers and insecurities, his little power trips, like, they grew more and more fierce towards his family. It just sucks how, Billy grew up around violence and making him into, like, a really horrible person. I mean, maybe if Billy's father, Lamont E. Stafford, if he would have guided him through life without abuse, maybe just he would have turned out differently. Or maybe not. I mean, life back then was different. I mean, Lamont, like Billy's dad, he also beat Billy's mom, right? And her name was Winifred Woodworth, or Winnie for short. Now his dad, he was born in 1917. He died in 1986. And Winnie was 1920 to 1990. And, like, Jane's life was totally in terror. Like, living with a bully, sadist, woman beater, and just living life as an abused wife. I mean, it would eventually take its toll on Jane, that's for sure. And even the cops around town, like, they knew of Billy. Like, Billy had a wicked dislike for cops. Like, they all knew he was just a bit of an arsehole. And he would often threaten police. Like, he'd give them a hard time when they stopped him. And Billy was just one of these tough guys. You kind of thought he was above the law. Like, just well over 220 pounds. He drank like a fucking fish. Loved to fight. And anybody around town, it didn't matter. Like, he'd pick on you or start some kind of shit. Now, he bragged to everyone that he was born on Friday the 13th because he was such a badass motherfucker. And he believed this to give him notoriety. And little fact that he wasn't actually born on a Friday, it was actually a Thursday that he was born. The failed marriage stuff, too, like, Jane didn't really know much about Billy's past, so he didn't really talk about it that much. Like, she knew he had kids and stuff, right? But, like, I think he had, 5 kids prior? And, he was weird, because his previous wife, Pauline Oikel, so she wanted to do birth control. He would not let her take birth control, because then she'd be of no use to him, right? Because she couldn't bear his children. Now, even, like, they were together when Billy was around 21 years old, but that ended in divorce roughly 6 years later, and it was actually granted on the grounds of cruelty. So, like I said, he had a bunch of kids with Pauline, like 5 kids prior to the divorce with Billy, and he'd also not only beaten her, but he beat her kids as well throughout those years. Like, at points, he would just get drunk and throw knives at the children just to see how close he could come without hitting them. And just crazy shit like that Pauline took the measures that she did to get out. And it's just too bad that Jane didn't do the same and hightail it out of there as well. But Pauline remembers a little before trying to leave Billy that he was away on the fishing boats. Now, he would go away for like a 2-week hitch and then come back again. Now, during one of these times, Pauline was offered an out by a cousin, and they left while Billy was at work on the fishing boats. Upon Billy's return, he found his family gone. So, what did he do? He went over to Pauline's mom's house, and he beat the shit out of her. But he didn't find out anything. Now, Pauline and Jane's life, like, they seem very similar in ways. Like, Billy was just an all-around piece of shit person. And there's also a tale that when he was on a fishing trip back in 1974 that he boasted about one night drunk to Jane that I got away with murder one time and I can do it again. And she's like, Okay, what the fuck? So, Billy went on drunk that he said he got in an altercation with one Jimmy LeBlanc. He was a Liverpool fisherman, and he was aboard the Mercy Enterprise, but his death was ruled an accident. Billy made claims to Jane that he actually got in a little argument with him. He picked him up and he literally threw him overboard, and the guy couldn't swim. So that goes that, and that was actually deemed an accident of falling overboard, I would assume, by police. So yeah, what a great guy, eh? And Jane's relationships too, like even before she met her abusive husband before fucking Billy. There was a guy that she met over in Germany there, because her family ended up being stationed over there because her father worked in the Canadian Forces. And she met a guy named Joe. So this is probably the only closest thing that she probably came to love. Because this was when she was about 14 years old. Now, her father, like I said, was stationed in Germany at a Canadian base. So the family sailed to Europe from Quebec. And Jane was excited on the ship because it was her first time. But she ended up getting seasick. So they kind of turned her off on the whole idea, right? But, the whole seasick thing, after this, she wouldn't get on another boat nor go swimming. And I don't think she learned how to swim, so. And the place that they were stationed at was right across from everything, like the local bar, Jane's school, and her father ended up maintaining his alcoholism, throughout his Canadian Forces days. He would often have people over drinking, he'd, be over at the pub, and back then they would use ration cards given by the servicemen, so you'd put that card in the window. Now, this would allow them to have beer and cigarettes delivered. And also, they would have little ration cards, so this entitled them to buy liquor and smokes duty free at the base. And the ones that didn't use their ration cards, they ended up giving to Jane's father. So his fucking drinking days was pretty much endless, He had cigarettes, he had booze, he was good to go. And I know that Jane pretty much had a way better time over that way than she would have with Billy. I mean, she even began to learn Germany. She participated in volleyball, and she won numerous ribbons while over there. And even when she was about 15, this is when she left Germany, but during the last 8 months that she was there, was a really magical time for her. It kind of always stuck with her, because she now had a boyfriend. And the man was also in the service. Now, she met him at a Salvation Army center. Now, the guy tried, to be sweet to her or whatever. And the guy had his own car, motorcycle, a few other things, I'm sure that which impressed her. And it wasn't it was more so the freedom that both of them connected on so many levels. They both felt free and, just carefree when they were with each other. But her parents, her dad, she wasn't allowed to date, but she did so regardless. Because, it was something that she had to do. She was in love. Now, Joe, he ended up throwing her a party on her 15th birthday at the pub, and he gifted her a very nice watch. Now, once home, Jane was, strucken with awe, and she showed the watch to her mother. Now, her mother replied, "Don't tell your father." Overhearing this, Jane's father replied, "Don't tell me what?" And then he found out about her new boyfriend. So this news had Jane's father all pissed off. Now, he grounded Jane for the next few weeks, and pretty much until her father was finished his job at the base. The family would have to leave to go back to Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. She explained to Joe the current circumstances, and both were heartbroken, but they hung out. They snuck around for a bit, and she started to skip school just to be by his side. And the only reason that her father found out she was skipping school was because her brother kind of told on her. Now, this made the father totally pissed, and he ended up beating Jane with his belt, and that was the very first time her father had laid a hand on her. Joe, he saw her like the next day all beat up and shit, and he was really upset, to the point that he just wanted to stay away just for the sake of her safety. And Jane didn't want that, as it was almost time to go back to the Cape. So she snuck out of the house the next night, and Joe picked her up. He was driving around the countryside. He ended up parking, and the two went for a walk. This wasn't until they reached a field, and then Jane asked Joe to make love to her, which he kind of declined at first, but upon hearing what she said, kind of changed his mind. Like, she wanted one good memory, and the two connected that night. Now, the next day, Joe said that he would be at the station there before they left. This would have been on February 5th, 1964. So the Hurshmans were all packed up and ready to go. She arrived at the bus station, but she didn't see Joe there. And, kind of saddened by this, she gathered her belongings and she started to head out. But then she heard her name being yelled through the crowd. Now, Joe had come to see her off. He reassured her that they would stay in touch and that he'd be stationed back to Canada here soon enough. Now, when Jane returned back home, she would write to Joe, but the Hurshmans didn't have a permanent address just yet, so he couldn't mail her letters at that time. And once they got a fixed address, she ended up getting a reply. Now, she kept this letter in her diary, and that was pretty much, I think, the only letter, but she did continue to write to him, and after that, she received no responses back from Joe. Now, Jane recalls thinking that he'd just forgotten about her, and yeah, it really sucked. She was really heartbroken on that. So shortly after returning back from Germany, Jane ended up staying in Liverpool at her grandmother's house, Mildred Mills. So Mildred Mills had a boyfriend. That boyfriend had a grandson that actually stayed with them. His name was Milfred, or Milfy. So the two started to see each other, him and Jane. Now, when Jane thought she'd never see Joe again, she received a call from her mother. Joe was actually in Winnipeg and he wanted to see her, and the reason that he didn't reply was due to being in a motorcycle accident. But Jane had a hard time with this. She didn't like Winnipeg, and she didn't want to move there. But she was also starting up the relationship with Milfy here. And that was it. That was unfortunate. It just didn't work out from there. It just comes to mind that maybe if she had just went with Joe, she would have been a lot better off. So, that was just a little bit about Jane and her happiness in her relationship before this. Now, the one with Milfy, she was just starting up. I don't know. It seems like when she gets into relationships, things go good with these guys. Or maybe she's just meeting pieces of shit fucking guys, right? But it's just her happiness should have came forward and should have came before anything, right? So, yeah, so let's talk about Milfy here. Alright, so Milfy. When Jane was about 16, she married Milfy, and the two ended up staying at his grandparents' house. Now, Milfy was known to dabble into the booze, and he would often leave Jane behind while he'd go out on his drunken adventures, because that was just more important than Jane. And even when he got her knocked up, he was a slimy prick. He was an uncaring person. He spent more time in their relationship drunk than being there for Jane. And even when Jane went into labor with the baby, he was nowhere to be seen. And poor Jane ended up giving birth without the father present. And little Alan was born to the world. So shortly after, roughly about a year, Jane was pregnant again, and with Milfy being more absent than before. So Milfy only gave a fuck about his bottle, and like I said, he would just go leave at any given moment and go get drunk. So she got fed up, and she kind of packed up the kids and headed down to a neighbor's house. This was also during a snowstorm, so the car ended up getting stuck in the road. And she left the kids in the car, went to the neighbors, and they came back to get everybody. Now, Jane wanted to get the divorce underway, and Milfy was no stranger to cheating, and he cheated on Jane numerous times. And, like, Jane was by no means a stupid lady. So, like, I think that she was as smart as they come. I mean, life just threw her some really tough shit, and she did the best she could to overcome it. Now, to figure all this out, like the plan for divorce and everything, she would actually cheat on him the same as he did to her. But she decided to go out and look around. She ended up meeting Billy Stafford in the process. So Billy was kind of like a friend to Milfy, but when Jane set her eyes on Billy, she knew that this would be her way out. The two slept together, and the divorce was soon on its way, and she would eventually be free from Milfy. But he would look after the kids and whatnot for a bit, and she would just start her affair with Billy. With Milfy out of the picture, Jane started to think that things with Billy was going to be the relationship to turn things around. Because she went through the ringer a couple times before. All, with Milfy, and except with Joe. She fell in love with Joe, and I think that could have been real with them. But, everything seemed awesome for Billy and Jane, but he can only keep up his good guy charade for so long. Now, he didn't want her taking birth control like I said prior, and they did have their son, Darren. But after the birth of their son, Jane wanted Bill to sign some forms. Now, this would have been for a procedure for tubal ligation, or getting your tubes tied. Billy wanted no part of this, but she already had the procedure done before that day. So when Billy came, he was really pissed about it, and he fucking went home and drank and treated her like shit. So, pretty much as soon as they got home from the hospital, he ended up making her do all the housework, clean up after his drunken mess the night before. And, this is a pretty shit thing to do. She just had a procedure done. Jane needed a rest to heal up, but Billy just got drunk, screamed at her, and he made advances towards her. Now, because of the operation, she couldn't have sex. But you think Billy cared for that? Nah. He would force himself on her and pretty much just take her whenever she wanted, and that's not cool. So, do you think her procedure got, healed up anything? No, he pretty much just raped her every fucking time he could. Now, there was one time that Jane went to the docks to meet Billy. This was after his 2 or 3 week hitch on the fishing boats. The two went home, and she had some steaks made for him. And he didn't want steaks, so he made her make a meatloaf instead. And he headed upstairs to chat with his son, because he got him a new hat. Now, he gave his son the hat, and then he said thank you, as any other kid would. But Billy flipped his shit because he didn't say thank you, Dad. And he began to strike the kid for not using manners, and going on about how they weren't white trash and this wasn't how manners were taught. Now, that's weird. But Jane tried to interfere, and she was pushed aside onto the ground. Jane always stuck up for the kids and gave shit to Billy for hitting them. But he just knocked her out whenever he felt like it. Jane brought home a bucket of chicken for supper one night there, and Billy was there, drinking his face off with his buddy. The two ate the bucket of chicken and drank all night. When Billy's friend left, Billy got talking to Jane, and he got jealous. And he told Jane that she brought home that chicken to impress the other man. And he ended up giving her a beating. Fucking stupid, insecure fuck. And it was always around this time that Jane felt like an empty shell. Like, life with Billy was absolute hell. Every day there was something that would set Billy off. Jane would be his fucking punching bag. And he purposely messed the house so she would have to clean it. Like, she never, ever got a break. There was times that, even when Billy would beat the kids, Jane would actually take full responsibility for their actions. She blamed herself for their actions, and the mothering on her part. So, I mean, that's gotta be some part of, like, battered woman syndrome, right? I mean, that's... You live in the same shit every day. Nothing changes, and it's just... You're scared for your life. I mean, that's gonna play a hard time on your brain. And most things in life take a toll on that on its own. So, I mean, living that and just... Yeah, it's rough. Now, Billy would just blather on about how he wants his kids to learn shit and, and he beats them so they'll learn. But I think he just enjoyed it. He was just a prick. So sometimes Billy, to get his wife's attention, he would point his gun around her. So, like, he kind of, like, point it wherever she was, in the kitchen or the garden, anything. And then he'd take aim, and then he'd take fire, and scaring the shit out of her. And, like, that's a horrible thing on its own. Like, the guy was just whacked right out of her. Imagine doing something, not knowing, and then getting shot at. Like, what if you turned, or, like, you were coming up from something, you get a bullet in the head out of nowhere, just for some drunk guy trying to amuse himself. I don't know. But, even if he hit her with a bullet or anything, she'd pretty much be dead. And, like, this folks here is how life was with Billy Stafford. Day in, day out. Everything unpredictable. Now, Billy knew what he was up to, like, even after, like, the bruises on Jane would show up. Bruises on the kids. But more so the kids. If he got drunk and he beat them, the next day he'd be nice and, like, I'll buy him an ice cream or something. He'd be like, I love you. And, as if it made things alright. So I guess Jane was just now at the end of her rope. She told him that she wanted a divorce, and she did this face to face. Billy kind of laughed and said, I ain't gonna be no 3-time loser. Kind of just egging her on to try it. And if she actually went through with it, he'd take that gun of his, and he'd shoot her family one by one. He threatened the kids' lives on, like, numerous occasions. And Jane knew that he would one day make good on this, and that scared her more than anything. Like, Jane, she loved her boys to pieces. So, she didn't really know what to do, neither did her oldest. What was going the police gonna do? Like, who could protect them from fucking Billy fucking Stafford? Now, even the family dog, like, Jane had a pet. The dog's name was Blue. He got kicked around a lot. And one time she remembers Billy actually holding him down while he urinated on him to establish dominance. So this is the stuff that he did. Every day. No matter what. Like, not most of the same things, but it was a whole variety of just weird abuse and outbursts and crying and everything else. Now, the youngest kid, he wasn't eating fast enough for Billy one night at the dinner table, so he took it upon himself to feed him. He shoved handfuls of food actually, like, down the kid's throat, like, held his mouth open and fired them down there. So this caused the poor little guy to puke. Then when that happened, it was all over his bowl, all over the place. Billy scooped that all up and force-fed his kid his own puke that he just threw up. Every drop. And, like, even the sexual abuse stuff in this case is way over the top disturbing, too. Like, he would sometimes tie Jane up by the hands, sometimes the feet, or both, and he'd make her go into a position for anal sex. So he would lube up a piece of plumbing pipe 4 or 5 inches long and about an inch round. So he would cover that in Vaseline and insert that into Jane's ass. But Jane wasn't allowed to take that piece of pipe out until Billy told her it was okay. She remembers a little time after she had the baby. The hospital ended up shaving her vagina bare. And that's actually what Billy kind of liked, so he kept it that way. Now, he didn't shave her like a normal person. Instead, he tied her to a chair, undressed her, so she'd be there naked on the chair. He'd take tweezers, and he'd pull out every one of her pubic hairs individually. And yeah, this was repeated usually every 2 or 3 week hitch when Billy got back from the fishing boats. Same thing. It's just, I know that was a little dark here, and I'm sorry, but like half of these is just, it's bad. Like I said, like some of the stuff's the icing on the cake, I guess. It's just, even like one time there, they were coming from the fishing boats here. He went home to Jane, he got drunk, and he wanted to do it doggy style. So we had her parading around on all fours, wearing a dog leash, being led around by Bill. So Bill let her sit there for a minute. He went out. He brought in he brought in their dog. This was a German Shepherd. He made the dog do this deed instead of him. When Jane objected to this, he would piss in a glass and then make her drink it. And this is the great Billy Stafford, ladies and gentlemen. An all-around piece of shit human. And it's all these ordeals that would eventually cause Jane to focus on what she had to do to Billy. She talked to a man named Arthur Taylor. She offered this guy $20,000 in life insurance money from Billy upon his death. She wanted nothing from it. None of it. No part. It was all his just to get rid of Billy for her. But he declined. She did try to contact him throughout this, and she wanted to see if he can get another person to commit the murder. But eventually it didn't happen, and to no avail, they just lost contact. As Billy's violence grew, his little outbursts around town, everybody was fed up with them. He ended up getting blacklisted for many fishing boats around the community. So he pretty much became drunk and jobless. So he sat around getting drunk, picking on his family, shit like that. On March 11th, 1982, Billy would have been about 41 years old now. He was pretty drunk on the booze, and he threatened his neighbor. This was a little earlier on in the day. Now, Billy kind of just stewed on this conversation all day. He got a lot drunk. He just drank all day. Now, he had the bright idea to go get some gas and burn her trailer down. He took what money was in Jane's purse, but all that was in there was the money for the truck insurance. He didn't care. He took it, and he went and got a 5-gallon gas can. He got Jane to drive, and him and Ronnie hopped in, and they got totally wasted. Ronnie ended up passing out for a bit. Now, Bill wasn't far behind. He was pretty drunk. He'd pass out, he'd wake up, pass out, wake up. And when he'd wake up, he'd be up for a little bit, and he told Jane that once he was done burning that trailer down, he was going to deal with her oldest son. And that kind of stuck with Jane. Why wouldn't it, right? Jane finally had enough. They ended up at a friend's house playing cards. They drank some beer, and then they left about a little after 8:30. Jane still thinking on what Billy said. Billy was now passed out drunk. He was in the truck. They rolled up. They got to Bangs Falls, pulled into the driveway. Now, Ronnie, he hopped out of the truck into the house and he headed for bed. So it must have been really exhausting drinking with Billy all day and, getting belittled every step of the way. Jane sat in the truck with a passed out Billy. She was too afraid to leave him on his own. But Billy ended up making a rule that she was only to stay with him when he was passed out, until he woke up, or he beat her. Now, Jane gathered her thoughts and finally knew what needed to be done. She gave the truck horn a little honk, once, just to test to see if Billy would wake up. He did not. She honked again, but longer this time. Her oldest, Alan, had woken up and peeked out the curtains. She signaled for him to come here, which he did. Jane told Alan to get the gun and load it. And this wasn't like an unusual request, as Billy had he asked him to load the gun a few times, like if they see wildlife in the woods or something, right? Now the 12-gauge shotgun was loaded and brought up to his mum. She told him to go inside. Then she walked up to the truck, put the shotgun to Billy's head, turned away, and blew Billy Boy's head clear off his body. What a relief that must have been for her, to finally be free and not have to have a feeling of dread loom over you. Now, Jane asked Alan to bring the gun to the neighbors, Margaret Jodry. He was going to grab a fresh pair of clothes, as the current ones had Billy's blood and brains all over them, and the gun would be disposed of. Jane drove the truck about 7 miles away, and she ended up getting a ride halfway home with her parents. And it wasn't unusual for them, for these kind of phone calls and mishappenings, I guess, because they knew what a bad person Billy was. Now, the gun was broken up and thrown into the Medway River. Now, this is a river located in Queens County, Nova Scotia. It's about 121 kilometers long. It's actually one of the major rivers of Nova Scotia. Didn't take police long to roll up to Billy and Jane's house the next day. They began asking her questions about Billy, when she'd last seen him, what he was wearing, shit like that. To which she fainted. She was brought into the house just to relax. They ended up taking her to the Liverpool detachment for questioning, and they knew Billy beat her, and they took pictures of her battered body just for future reference. She didn't really say much to police when questioned about it, and she specifically asked to see Billy's father, Lamont Stafford. Now, when he himself asked her if she had killed Billy, she admitted to him that she had, and she was the one who shot him. Now, as she began to tell police the story of her years of abuse at Billy's hands, and this is as the book states, after her questioning and whatnot, she was allowed to go home. Like, that right there kind of tells you what the police thought of Billy. So, I mean, that's, he killed a piece of shit guy, and, yeah, some guys knew she did right by this, but others knew Billy, and some, not all, liked Billy, or others worked with him on the fishing boats or whatever, right? But sooner than later, the courtroom would end up hearing tales that nobody should even have to think about. But Jane, she sat through it all. Sometimes being asked to speak up, she was a tiny, timid woman who knew nothing but abuse, pretty much her whole life. I mean, minus the time that she spent with Joe. And after the courtroom and the jury members heard her horrific tales, about how life with Billy really was, it kind of made everybody think. Now, the courtroom jurors heard tales that Stafford beat his previous wives, and he also uttered threats to Jane, to the kids, and even that was just a little bit of an eye-opener. And the thing is, abuse wasn't much talked about. People knew it went on, but back then, I guess people mostly looked the other way. Initially in the investigation, police thought that Alan had something to do with Billy's murder, because he initially took the blame for his mum, saying that Billy was going to beat her to death, and he stopped, and he shot him and killed him to save his mum. But due to a polygraph test that Jane had, she failed, and everybody knew that it was her that killed him and not Alan. While on trial now, Jane's life was compared to that of living on a concentration camp, like Auschwitz. She was a prisoner who lived in fear every day of her life. I mean, the out-of-nowhere knockout punches from Billy, like that shit would have you on edge at any given time. It was terrible. I mean, who would want to live like that? But she did, and she did it, like, with fucking stride. And she's a stronger one than any woman I could think of here. Like, even the lawyer, like, that represented Jane, Alan Ferrier, he kind of wanted everybody to know about the abuse from Jane. So he got Jane to open up about it. All her experiences, everyone with Billy. Nobody had ever heard of such horrible abuse that one man could inflict. Even the mental health issues weren't as much talked about back then either. And Billy definitely had some issues that maybe modern medicine could have solved, or perhaps not, but doctors could have maybe tried to pinpoint the issues that he had, and maybe picked away at how you could try to help him. Or maybe it was just Billy. He was just considered, his upbringing and everything, that might have had a lot to do with it. Or maybe that he was just a piece of shit and that he deserved what he got over time. Now, during the trial, it was argued that if it was in self-defense, since Billy was actually killed while he was asleep. Now, the woman, she lived in fear every day. Like, Jane went through hell. The jurors now got a glimpse of that. And even if he wasn't half asleep or whatever, he would have woke up, and she knew there'd be a foul move from Billy coming on. And, the fear of just wondering if he'd burn the neighbor's home down, or he'd make good on his other threat about killing Alan. She wasn't going to let that go. And she was now going to do what she had to do. So the self-defense argument, that actually went back and forth. And the witnesses that were called to the stand, they told their tales of what they'd seen, what they've heard, especially Ronnie Wombold. That was the guy that was sort of staying at the Staffords. So he gave his testimony on the matter, saying that he too was beaten by Stafford. He beat the kids. He was the one that seen him, Billy force-feeding him his own puke. Now, Alan had also spoken about his dealings with Billy and what happened to his mom. And both of Billy's ex-wives were there as well. Everybody had something to say into who Billy Stafford was as a person. So after hearing everything about the case, the jury made a decision that acquitted Jane Hurshman. But that was actually short-lived, as some 3 weeks later, the courts would file an appeal, and then Jane would actually be served with papers. So the police officer who served her the papers for court made an apology to her that he even had to drop them off to begin with. Now, a new trial was ordered, but to avoid a second trial, Jane pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and she ended up serving 6 months in jail for the whole ordeal. After everything settled, Jane ended up becoming a spokesperson that spoke out about domestic violence. She ended up getting married again, and she had a very happy relationship. She supported the book that was written on her life by Brian Bally. She also wanted people to know, about the abuse, so main reason for the book. Because people need to know about the repercussions of that, the mental health issues afterwards. it can just all be studied or whatever, right? Now, Valley also wrote a second book called Life Without Billy. Now, I read the first one, Life with Billy, just now doing this. This is why I've been busy and I've been sick and I put this off. But I wanted to glance through everything that I could for this because I know this is one hell of a dandy case. So, I mean, the books are great. You can look online for them. They're not overly cheap. I think one's like $20. And the other's like 15 or something. So, I mean, they're good books. But Jane kind of slipped into a little bit of depression there. But she did seem to have her life together for a bit. She started taking sleeping pills. And she fell deeper and deeper into depression onward for years, eventually becoming suicidal. Now, on February 22nd, 1992, Jane was found by a couple. She was slumped down in her car. She had a .38 caliber rifle in the car nearby, and one gunshot wound to her chest. Her death was ruled a suicide by the coroners, and this story has a really sad ending. Like, Jane, she was doing well, but I guess the years of abuse, everything, maybe that caught up with her. I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's still a sad ending. And I know that, like, a lot of you guys didn't really know this case that much. That's why I kind of wanted to make you aware of it. And I know it was in my head, but I never even thought about it. So I'd like to thank my buddy Mike for letting me go through this again for him here. And like I said, like, I even forgot it. So, and that, my friends, is our little tale of Billy Stafford and Jane Hurshman. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for giving me time, and thank you for waiting on this one. I appreciate you all. Take her easy. Until next time. And there's also like a suicide hotline out there. Like, it's available 24/7. I mean, you can call 1-833-456-4566 in Canada to speak to somebody if you're ever not feeling yourself. And if you're being abused, just try to talk to somebody, let somebody know. Just don't stay in the relationship, because it always gets worse. There's always a way out somehow, and it just starts with one step. So I just want to let you guys know, like, there's options out there, I guess, is just what I mean. So that's all I meant. Well, you guys take care.